Good evening. Good evening. Welcome, my friends, to the show that, well, I guess it ends eventually, but we're going on 21 years now. Our show is old enough to drink in every state. So I hope you're having a great week as a whole, and a couple of interesting questions and comments. If your parents made $100,000 in the 90s, you'd have to make $325,000 to have the same life in 2026. We're running to stand still. 325,000 is the new 100,000. Yeah. I swear, ever since my sort of software entrepreneurial days, it just sort of feels like, certainly with regards to salary and stuff like that, it just felt like I was running to stand still, just couldn't get ahead. Couldn't get ahead. So, let's see here. So, of course, the Supreme Court in America struck down Trump's Birthright Citizenship order. Isn't that something? And it was the women who voted to allow for the immigrants to have, or the tourists to have babies, right? So what happened? This is from Matt Von Swoll. A long time ago, the Supreme Court made a ruling that said black people could never be U.S. citizens no matter what. This ruling helped push the country towards a civil war. After the war, the nation set out to bury the hatchet for good by adding a new citizenship rule directly into the Constitution. Justice Thomas wrote a whole argument from there. He says, you can't figure out what the rule means until you remember what problem it was created to solve. The problem was simple. A group of people who genuinely belonged to this country, to America, were being told they could never be citizens. The rule was written to guarantee that those people and people like them would always be citizens no matter their race. It was a promise to people who already belonged. It was not, Thomas argues, designed as an automatic prize for anyone who happens to be born on American soil. And he wrote, blacks were entitled to citizenship because they were Americans. They had no other homeland, owed no allegiance to any foreign power, and were subject to no other authority. They, quote, fought and bled in the same battles, gained and gloried in the same victories, and were liable to be called upon to defend America in time of war alongside every other citizen. So that's kind of important. So this, of course, blacks had been in America for generations. By the time this came along, there's someone who's been in the country for generations and did not have legal legitimacy as a citizen for reasons of slavery and so on, and freed slaves. What do they mean? Well, they had no other country to go back to. They weren't citizens of any other country. They owed loyalty to no foreign king, no foreign government. America was the only home they'd ever had, and they had worked and suffered and fought for it more than most. Now, if you compare the negative effects of slavery to a baby born to two tourists who are in America for a 2-week vacation, that is not the same fact, reality, morality, process, or ethic at all. If you're in from China for a 2-week vacation, you are a Chinese citizen. The freed black slaves were nobody's citizens except, of course, as was gained America. You are subject to Chinese law. You can go back to China, and they kind of have to accept you as a citizen, unlike, I guess, Syrians have just decided that they don't want a bunch of Syrian, quote, refugees back from Germany because they get hundreds of billions of dollars over time in remittances from those people in Germany. And you are a citizen of another country. You are subject to that country's laws. You were born in that country. You have the full legal right to return to that country. And, in fact, you have to return to that country because you can't stay in America ad infinitum unless you do something to change your visa status or go for citizenship or something like that. So it's nothing alike. It is nothing to do with these same situations. Freed slaves who've been in America for generations is not the same as somebody flicking some soil on their toe after they step off from a plane and drop birth to a wee bairn. So being a citizen in the 19th century means this is your real permanent home. Being a citizen of a place and having your permanent home there was pretty much the same idea. This is before the days of mass travel and all that sort of stuff. So you were a citizen of the place where you actually lived your life and intended to stay for good. Of course, you could say, but weren't people made citizens simply by being born somewhere? Yes. And why did that work? Again, remember, when you wanted to go to America from England, you had a 4 to 6 week journey with horrible storms, with diseases, and with a fairly high fatality rate. I mean, the only fatality rate on sea voyages these days is hantavirus and dying from overeating at the buffet. In the 19th century, almost every baby was born in the exact same place the family lived. Air travel didn't exist. Sea travel was hazardous. So born here meant the family lives here. He writes, in America, you were generally a citizen if you were born here and this was your home. The legal word for home was domicile. The concepts were so linked as to be taken as effectively synonymous, such that Justice Bushrod Washington could say citizenship means domicile, home, permanent residence. So the wording was chosen carefully on purpose to leave certain people out. Before the rule went into the Constitution, there was an earlier version of it, a law passed in 1866. And the people who wrote that law picked their words very deliberately to make sure the citizens of temporary visitors would not be included. The senator who led the effort said it about as plainly as a person can. People who are only here for a short time are folks, quote, we would have no right to make citizens, and that includes their kids. He even worried that a looser wording might accidentally scoop those families in, so he tightened it on purpose to keep them out. Thomas's point is that when the rule later went into the Constitution itself, it created that exact same intention. The fancier constitutional language was meant to do the same job the 1866 law did. And I quote, even the most expansive executive interpretation of the citizenship clause ultimately denied citizenship to a child born here but domiciled abroad. Their family is from abroad. When Francis Heinrich, born of parents who ultimately returned to their native Austria, claimed to be an American citizen, President Grant's executive branch should say, nope, originally from Austria, doesn't count. Now, you know this subject to the jurisdiction. The Constitution says a citizen is someone born here and subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So the Supreme Court reads them loosely to mean something like anyone who has to obey our laws while they're standing on our soil, and that includes everyone, tourists included, right? If you go to America, you're subject to the laws of America. Otherwise, they'd be roaming bands of Charlize Theron-led, gas-guzzling warlords cruising around, not subject to any laws at all. Of course, you go to Japan, you're subject to the laws in Japan. It doesn't mean that you're a Japanese citizen. So everyone who goes to America has to obey American laws. That doesn't mean that everyone is a citizen, of course, right? So Justice Thomas, reads them to mean something much stronger, someone who is fully under America's authority and fully loyal to America with no competing loyalty to another country. So he points to 3 groups that everyone has always agreed were left out of citizenship. The children of foreign ambassadors, the children of enemy soldiers occupying American land, and Native Americans living under their own tribal governments. Why were these three left out? Because none of them was fully under U.S. control. They each answered to some other authority. In his words, children born to diplomats, hostile alien occupiers, and Indians and tribes were not citizens because they were not subject to the complete jurisdiction of the United States. For the same reason, the children of foreign temporary visitors, who were also not subject to the complete jurisdiction of the United States, were also not citizens, right? Because an embassy is considered foreign soil in many ways. Thomas says a tourist baby fits the same pattern because the baby and the parents are still tied to another country. So the same logic that excludes those three groups, he argues, should exclude the visitor's child, too. He writes, I would not interpret subject to the jurisdiction to refer to the exclusion of three bespoke categories of persons whose relationship to the sovereign was not described in those terms. There is a simpler interpretation of the text that was expressly endorsed by those closer in time to the ratification. Children born to diplomats, hostile alien occupiers, and Indians in tribes were not citizens because they were not subject to the complete jurisdiction of the United States. For the same reasons, children of foreign temporary visitors, who were also not subject to the complete jurisdiction of the United States, were also not citizens. And people who lived back then read it the same way, too. So Thomas argues that the fairest way to settle what the rule means is to ask how people understood it right after it was written while the meaning was still fresh. And when you do that, he says the evidence lines up behind his logic. Justice Thomas points to a Supreme Court ruling from 1884 that read the rule exactly the way he does. You had to be fully under U.S. authority and owe loyalty to no other country. He also points to the legal scholars of that era who studied the new rule closely and reached the same conclusion. Right? You don't pay income tax in the United States if you're a visitor. Domestic citizens are not deported if they commit crimes. Domestic citizens aren't deported if they stay too long. So Justice Thomas's larger point is that his reading isn't some clever modern reinterpretation cooked up to win the case. It's just a plain ordinary understanding people had at the time the rule was new, and I quote, unlike other settlers then, the Chinese, even those who lived here and wished to remain, had no path to citizenship and no means of freeing themselves from the grasp of China. The executive branch took the view that because domicile no longer ensured full integration into the American body politic, the citizenship clause's phrase, subject to the jurisdiction, must require more than domicile. That view would entail that a child born to Chinese parents domiciled in this country was not a citizen. Instead, the executive branch sought to replace the requirement of domicile, which would make any child of domiciled Chinese immigrants a citizen, with the requirement that the person's parents already be citizens. He attacks the other side's best evidence as a very strange thing for Americans to copy. To support its broad reading that anyone from anywhere at any time could plop a baby here and be a citizen, the court leaned heavily on an old English court case from the year 1608. But Thomas says that case is a shaky foundation for two reasons. First, it wasn't even really about citizenship. It was about whether a Scottish man was allowed to own land in England. Right? Owning land is not the same as being a citizen, right? You can buy a property in Panama without being a citizen. And you can start a business in Panama or a branch office or whatever without being a citizen. Second, the idea behind it was deeply old-fashioned and frankly un-American. The notion that anyone born on the king's land automatically belonged to that king forever, bound to him for life, a bit like a servant tied permanently to its master. Thomas asks the obvious question. Why? Why would the United States, a country that had just fought a bloody war, specifically to break free from a king, turn around and adopt a king and subject idea as the basis for American citizenship? It doesn't fit. If a stranger is a guest at your dinner table, you owe him courtesy and good treatment while he's there. But being a welcome guest for an evening doesn't make him your son. I mean, I think Charlie Kirk posted once that if you have a guest over, pregnant woman, and she goes into labor and has a child in your living room, that does not make her. You don't have to put her on the deed to the house, her kid on the deed to the house. Justice Thomas was clearly annoyed that the court didn't just rule on the specific situation in front of it. He seems upset that the court threw out the president's order completely, declaring it off limits in every imaginable case, all at once. And Thomas says that's reckless because it sweeps in extreme cases the court never even paused to consider. For example, he points out that the government couldn't deny automatic citizenship even to the baby of an enemy soldier, or the baby of a foreign spy, or a child who is raised in another country, joins a foreign army, and comes back to fight a war against the United States. In his words, quote, he cannot enforce the order against a child of an alien enemy or a child of a foreign spy. He cannot even enforce the order against children who are raised in a foreign country, join foreign armies, and fight wars against the United States. Justice Thomas closed his opinion, and I'll get to my sort of thoughts in a sec. Justice Thomas closed his opinion on kind of a sad note where he says that the entire purpose of this part of the Constitution was to lift people up who had been despised and degraded, and to hand them the full pride and dignity of being American citizens. It was meant to be something that carried a lot of weight and was honorable and was overcoming the historical injustice of saying all men are created equal and then allowing for slavery, at least in the South. Now he believes that same right is being given away cheaply, handed to the children of birth tourists and people here illegally on the basis of nothing more than the spot where a baby happened to come into the world. He says he doubts this ruling will hold up over time and that it actually cheapens the very citizenship it claims to be protecting. In his words, quote, I'm not sure that today's opinion will stand the test of time. Today's opinion devalues that citizenship. I respectfully dissent. So, what does that mean? So, women, let's be frank. We love the ladies. I live with two wonderful females, love them absolutely to death. We love the females. There are strengths and weaknesses with men and women. Now, why is it that the females voted to rescind President Trump's executive order pausing birthright citizenship, which is extremely rare in the world as a whole? Well, I'll get to the caller in a sec. One of the main reasons is that women are consensus-driven and very sentimental and baby-focused. Women love babies. Women do what is best for babies. I love that about women. It's why we're all here. It's why we're all alive. Women want to do what's best for babies, and women sympathize with mothers, and women sympathize with other women as a whole, and they sympathize with babies, and that's a beautiful thing. That's why we have culture. It's why we have community, at least when we used to have community. It's a beautiful thing that women do all of these wonderful and lovely community building, child protecting, consensus building, right? In general, throughout human evolution, men have created culture, and then women replicate and transmit the culture, right? Men create the songs, women are the Napster, right? Men create the artwork, women are the photocopiers. And again, it's a beautiful thing, and so on. So when women, as a whole, look at the question of birthright citizenship, they're not thinking about abstract law. They're not thinking about problems down the road. They're not thinking of second or third order effects. I'm not obviously reading the minds of the justices. I don't know what obviously is going on in their secret heart of hearts. I'm just talking about female nature as a whole. So for men, you have to put aside second and third order effects. You have to put aside the rule of law. You have to put aside logic. You have to put aside common law. You have to put aside objectivity. And you have to turn on your sentimental heart and imagine ordering a tear-stained woman on a rocky shore on a tippy boat and sending her off to the harsh seas. And the woman is very sad because she wants to have a better life in America. And she's got to go back to some terrible country where things are bad. And she's going to be very sad. And the baby's going to be crying. And that haunts women. And at a social level, at a familial level, at a community level, absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Male aggression is fantastic at a personal and social level because it deals with criminals, it deals with invaders, and so on. You combine it with the power of the state, right? All human impulses combined with the political power grow cancerous and swell to destruction. So 2 things you have to think about with regards to the female perspective on birthright citizenship. Number 1, will it make women sad if we don't give it to them? Yes. Okay, well, that's going to have a lot to do with it, how it goes, number 1. Number 2, will women be upset with me and call me heartless and cold if I don't give birthright citizenship to desperate women who are just looking for a better life? And men too, but basically they focus on the women. Right? Just understand these 2 things. Number 1, will it make women sad if I don't give it to them? I'm going to give it to them. Number 2, will I be called cold and heartless and mean if I don't give women birthright citizenship for their offspring? Yes, it will make women sad and women will call me mean. Sorry, I wish it were more complicated than that. And again, these are beautiful characteristics, but combined with political power, it's a catastrophe. And I'll tell you what this means in a very vivid context. Right? So think Scotland, Norway, Sweden, Siberia. It's fall. It's getting colder. It's winter. Let's say you don't have winter crops like turnips yet. And you, as a family, you have 5 kids, and you have racked your brain to make sure that you have enough food for the winter, right? You've dried your jerky, you've pickled your cucumbers, you have made and frozen your bread in the snowbanks. You have your traps for the winter rabbits. You have your grain. You have calculated feverishly, dangerously, obsessively, compulsively, desperately. You have calculated the calories you need for the winter. It's a long winter. There's a reason why there's usually some sort of festival of not eating at the end of winter, because you might as well make something religiously purifying if you can't eat anyway, because there's no food. And then, if you're a man, I guarantee you, you've had this scenario in your mind. And then, come February, the depth, the cold, you've really got to ration. Your children are hungry, but they're going to just have to wait. And the spring is a long way away. When the game comes back, when the hunting comes back, when you can plant some shorter-term crops. And what happens is your neighbors bang on the door. Bang, bang, bang on the door, baby. Your neighbors bang on the door, and they're shivering, and they're cold, and they're hungry. They're miserable. They lift up their shirts. You can see their ribs. And the woman is crying, and the children are crying, and the man is shamefaced and looking down, red on his cheeks. And they say, we got nothing. We can't make it. We've tried stretching out everything we can. We don't have enough. Our child was sick. We had to feed him more. Some mice got into our grain. We can't eat it. We've even eaten the dogs and the cats. We're out of food. Help us. Help us. Please. Right? We all know what the women will do if they get the chance. And again, none of this is a criticism about women, but it's a fact that the women will be like, come on in. We'll find a way to make it work. Now, what does the man say? The man says, we can't help you. You're going to have to move on. And the man may in fact have an axe behind his back when he's talking to the man. And he says, listen, man, maybe we could spare a tiny bit, but we are riding the razor's edge here, man. I've got it down to 0.02 calories come spring. And we made a bit of a foolish decision, fun though it was. My wife's actually pregnant, so the extra food I had as a buffer is going to be consumed by her need to feed the baby that's growing in her belly. We've got nothing for you. Now, the women want to be nice. They don't want, oh my God, they turned the Murphys away and they starved it. They could have found a way. Why didn't they, right? And the men, and it's not fun. It's not fun. Men have a lot of, moral responsibilities throughout history that is not fun. But I can tell you this, the reason that East Asians and Northern European whites have very high IQs is because the men won that conflict. And the men said, no, facts trump sentimentality. Math trumps pathological altruism. To be empathetic is to be suicidal. Now, women can have all of this beautiful empathy, and lovely it is. Women can have all this beautiful empathy because men say no. Men say no. We have to say no. Otherwise, everyone starves. And it is better that your family live than you and your neighbor's family all die. Men are used to, in a battlefield, your best friend is stabbed and he's begging you for help, and you look and you're like, well, he's going to die, and you've just got to fight on, and you'll mourn later. You're not happy about it. Nobody wants those situations, but we are decisive, which is why men have to be crowded out of the public square when it comes to making decisions about scarce resources, because to women, being upset generates resources. I'm sorry, I'm just going with evolution, right? Being upset generates resources, but I want to help these people. I want this, I want that. And men, we want to please women, both for the positive economics of getting love and affection and the negative economics of getting nagged and no sex and no affection. So we want to please women so women can complain and they get resources. Women can be sentimental and men will find a way. And in general, if we can find a way, we will. We will. We don't want our neighbors to starve. We will find a way. By God, if we can, we'll find a way. And if we can't, women, no. No. And we don't have any functional way in our society to say no to women as a whole, because women outvote men, and politicians can't succeed without pleasing women. And when women want something, women can't will Bitcoin into existence, but they sure as hell can nag, whine, complain, bitch and bully fiat currency into existence, because you can just copy paste that shit out of thin air, right? So to a woman in politics, it's like she's the wife of she's the queen. She's the queen. The king has infinite resources. The king can feed everyone. So when that bang comes on the door, women are like, we've got enough resources. We can help them, because there's no limit, because it's just copy paste imaginary money units. Just type whatever you want into your own bank account and call it a day. You can magic resources out of thin air. You can do anything you want. You're a wizard. You have a genie where you can say, you've got, Lord Jesus Christ himself. Copy paste loaves and fishes. You can make as much as you want. How dare you not help your neighbor? You can do anything you want. You must help your neighbor. And angry will creates imaginary resources through politics. Don't even have to raise taxes. Just borrow and print and make promises. Unfunded liabilities, same thing. So for women, and again, just emotionally, right? Love the women. Just want to be clear about that. But emotionally, women are like, well, we have infinite resources. So the only reason you wouldn't want to help your neighbor is because you hate him. You're just filled with irrational, vicious, wicked hatred towards this person, this group, this race, this ethnicity, this culture. You just hate them. Right? It would be like there's an infinite buffet, just food flowing like milk and honey. Food everywhere, groaning buffet. We're going to have to throw it all out at the end of the day. And someone, oh, I'm hungry. Can you help us with a little food? No. Kick them out into the snow. It's like, we're throwing this food out. Why the hell can't you give them some food? We've got all the resources we could possibly want. We've got everything we could possibly imagine. We've got more than we could ever possibly use. We're so wealthy, it's insane. And you can't help people? What's wrong with you? You hateful, evil bigot. That's the mindset. Because girl math, and listen, boy math is pretty much the same these days. But girl math is, if you've got infinite resources, the only reason you'd withhold infinite resources is because you hate someone. And hatred is bad, and prejudice is bad, and bigotry is bad, and how dare you withhold resources? So that's the bang, bang, bang on the door. Are people given birth in the country? That's number one. The other aspect is, well, why do the politicians like it so much? Because politicians, when a country becomes relatively free and wealthy, and America is, certainly as far as free speech goes, it is by far the freest country in human history, in the world as a whole, right? There's no hate speech in America. That's been adjudicated repeatedly by the Supreme Court. So why is it that politicians like this so much? Because politicians like being able to give people things that aren't theirs, right? It's why politicians say, yes, we'll find you housing, but never in their own house. This is why politicians say, yes, we'll give you money, but never their own money. It's like the loser guys who want foreign women because they can get a much more attractive foreign woman as an American by offering a green card in marriage to a woman who can then send money back to her family, have kids who are now American, and she can get her foothold, her clawhold into the American dream and clamber her way into the Elysium fields of marriage, divorce, alimony, palimony, child support, and the welfare state and old age pensions. Politicians like to be able to offer citizenship to people because citizenship is free money paid for by others, and then everybody wants the politicians to do what they want. Everybody wants the politicians, to do what they want, therefore the politician feels needed. I don't know, have you ever been in a situation where people are just desperate that you give them what they want? I try to avoid it because it's very inflationary on the ego. It puffs you up to be in very, very high demand, and everyone wants a piece of you. I mean, sometimes it can be really nice, and I'm not putting my own listeners in this, but when I was at a Night for Freedom, I think it was 2017 or something like that, it was a beautiful night, a wonderful night, and I stayed until, 3 a.m, meeting listeners. There were like 500 people, and we all had a hug and told stories, and it was a beautiful night. And people didn't want anything from me in particular, just, gave people hugs and shook their hands and listened to their stories. But if you've ever been in a situation where people really want something from you, it's really quite a heady, emotional place to be. And politicians love to give out what other people have earned. And citizenship is a very powerful one, so they'll get votes that way. All right, let us get to the callers. Gadsden, if you have questions, issues, comments, I'm happy to hear. Go
Can you
on.
hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, and you can still hear me.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So my question was really it's somewhat related to this, and it's because we see the societies sort of crumbling around us due to bad decisions and bad management. People getting of age and not really educating themselves and voting on these issues. I think women are sadly, regrettably, a big issue in this. And my question really pertains to
Hang on. I'm so sorry. I apologize for interrupting. Bad decisions, you said, and bad management.
yes,
I
bad
don't. I don't agree. It doesn't mean you're wrong and I'm right. I don't agree with that because bad decisions and bad management cannot bring down society. If somebody makes a bad decision to open a restaurant in the wrong place, right? They go to Chinatown and they open some Alaskan frozen fish sushi hellscape, and nobody wants to go to their restaurant and they lose their life savings or whatever. That doesn't bring society down. I don't think bad management, bad decisions is what brings society down. I think it's people who want something for nothing through the bloody power of politics. It is not confusion. It is not bad decisions. It is active evil through the power of politics that brings society down as a whole. And I don't want to get you off from your main path. I just wanted to point that out.
I think you're right, but with one small correction, right? Because we all, well, at least if you are amoral or whatever, you want the things from the government, you want the free stuff. I think a lot of people want that. I would love that private gold-plated jet, but I would never do it. I would never do it. But I think the big issue is that people are acting on this because they don't know any better. They have been propagandized through the media, through the educational system, or lack of educational system, and they've
Okay,
made all
sorry,
these
sorry,
bad
sorry to
decisions.
interrupt again. I apologize. So that's an interesting question, and I don't have any big final answers. So this is more of a discussion, and it's a very interesting one, I think. So when you say they don't know any better, how do you know that they don't know any better? I'm not saying you're wrong, but you seem very certain, and maybe you've got great arguments I've never thought of, which is certainly possible. Why do you think you're so certain that people don't know any better, that they're not actively colluding with evildoers, but they're just kind of confused and don't know stuff?
I think that's a great question because you can't really know. And I think the sort of personal responsibility paradigm you've always been preaching, and I completely agree with it, would suggest, and that's what we were told as well, that if you didn't abide by the law, that's no excuse, right? You gotta, because you didn't know. I mean, it's your responsibility to educate yourself on these things. So either way, if they don't know any better or not, it's I've been out there, you've been out there educating and talking to people about this and giving them all the.
No, did we lose him? All right, I'll have to until he comes back. Maybe the,
Oh, sorry.
oh, you're back.
Can you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So I will just start a bit over. But no, either way, even if they don't know or they do know, it's their responsibility to educate themselves on these issues. And that's why if they don't know, it's not particularly important because you and we've been talking about these issues. I guess you in a more public format, but me privately in my own life with the people I know, and took all the slings and arrows for doing so. And now society is in a state, and it's in a really wretched state. And I think my big question here is that you gotta. Is it wrong? Is it fine? Is it moral? Is it a fair thing? We want to aspire to live the good life. We want people to look at us and say, you're living with virtue, you're following your morals, and you're very happy. You are enjoying life, and it's a great thing. You want people to have that perception of you. That's one of the best ways of conversion, as you have also discussed. And with that in mind, I sort of have this urge, this sort of inner kindling. A lot of times, particularly here this summer, you're reminded of how much better the climate could be around the world. You just sort of when I go to a place that's less dictatorial. I live in the
Sorry, I'm going to need you.
godforsaken
I
Europe.
think you're wandering a little bit on your topic. You're going to have to be a tiny bit more concise. So maybe ask a question or something, because I feel like we're
Yeah,
going through some
yeah.
threads of thought with
Oh,
now a
yeah. Oh,
particular
that gets me
destination.
down. Absolutely. Okay. Do you think it's fine to go the digital nomad life or just live to another country and live there.
Yeah, I mean, there's no violation of the non-aggression principle going digital nomad life. But as to your question, and I'm happy to get from the people who are in the chat as well, like, what are your thoughts on this? I myself go with a kind of analogy. Let me sort of share it with you and see if it makes sense to you. So if there's a guy named Bob, he buys a house and he genuinely does not know that there are 3 bodies buried under the rose bush in the back corner of the yard, right? Now, if there are a bunch of kids out there, they're kind of digging around, as kids do. They dig stuff up. They want to, like kids on the beach, they dig their little tunnels and so on, right? Their little trenches, and all the engineers. Now, if he genuinely doesn't know that there are 3 bodies buried under the rose bush in the back corner of the garden, then he'll have no anxiety if the kids are digging out there. Is that right?
That's right.
Now, if Bob, the moment the kids get close, they say, "Oh, kids, don't, back up, stop digging there. Do not dig there. Come over here. Come here. I'm going to give you some popsicles. I'm going to take these shovels away. Get inside the house." Now, can he claim to have no knowledge of anything bad under the rose bush in the back of the garden if he freaks out when the kids start digging there?
No.
Right. So if I say we should end the welfare state, if people are genuinely confused and have no idea about what's good for them, what's right, what's wrong, if people are genuinely confused and I say we should end the welfare state, the forced welfare state should be replaced with private charity, what would most people who are poor say?
They would say, I don't want this. I want the welfare state to remain. I need the welfare state to survive.
Right. So they're not ignorant, because ignorant people are curious. Like if somebody said to me, well, I want to tell you about the major differences in this, superstring theory of physics and this other theory of physics, I'd be like, sure. I'm happy to hear, right? I'm sure I'm curious about that, right? But when people always fall down a particular line that benefits themselves, they cannot claim to be ignorant. They cannot claim to be ignorant because ignorance has with it indifference or curiosity. If somebody is, let's say I go to Japan, right? And somebody looks at me and says a bunch of words in a very calm tone in Japanese, then if I don't understand Japanese, I'm not going to be upset with him. I might say, yeah, sorry, man. Arigato. I do not speak Japanese, so we'll have to not do this, right? Or maybe I'll pull out, whatever. So I'm not going to be upset with him, right? But if I then pull out some translation babblefish, I think AirPods could do it now, right? So if I pull out something and the translation is some horrible death threat, right? Well, then I'm upset, right? Then I'm angry. I'm going to confront him and call the cops or whatever it is that I'm going to do to deal with that kind of situation. So if I'm genuinely ignorant, I'm not bothered. However, if I'm bothered, I also cannot claim to be genuinely ignorant. In other words, if I say, well, I don't speak Japanese, and some guy's just mumbling at me in Japanese, and then I say, what? That's how could you say such a thing? Right? Then I can't also then claim to be ignorant of Japanese. So I think that people are very cunning. And I put this is very, all the way from high IQ to low IQ, right? Very cunning. People know exactly what is good for them and what is bad for them. And if you were to say to women, well, you know what? We are going to make hiring decisions purely voluntary. There's no quota systems. You don't get this. You don't get that. You get whatever you negotiate because you're strong, independent women. So whatever you negotiate, you get in the workforce. If you want a year-long maternity leave, you're going to have to negotiate for it, right? So if we were to say to women, we're going to treat you as independent adults and you get what you negotiate, or if we were to say this to Hispanics or blacks or whatever it is, right? It's going to be completely blind. We want to have a colorblind society. So your admissions to universities are going to be, no race is going to be indicated. No sex is going to be indicated. And it's going to be a meritocracy. It's going to be without preference to race or sex. What would a lot of people say?
They might like the idea in theory, but I think they would recoil if it got any close. They might agree with you in passing, or they would ask you what that means. What equal means? Is it equity? Equality means different things for different people.
Well, I would make the case that we don't want racism and sexism in economic affairs, so we are no longer ever going to take race and sex into account when getting into universities, when hiring, or anything like that. It's going to be completely colorblind. It's going to completely be sex blind. And I mean, what would what would most women say to that?
I think they would say yes.
Not in a million years.
Why not?
Why not? Well, okay. Sorry, I was going to ask you to steel man my case. Well, why not? Okay, so have you ever been a manager?
Yes.
Okay, have you managed men and women?
Yes.
Okay, have you noticed any difference?
Yeah, I have.
And what are your differences?
The differences are at least was mostly men in my case. The men were more blunt, um, sort of a higher tolerance for disagreement. Uh, the women were had other strengths, a lot of like culture and sort of smaller things like events. They were very good at facilitating.
Sorry,
And
facilitating culture? What does that mean?
sort of, you have a Christmas party or something. That's something they care about. They will bring a cake to work. Like none of the men I knew
Come
did that.
on. So the men are blunt and disagreeable, and you get to the facts and productivity, but the women bring in some cake?
Yeah, that no,
Okay,
I mean,
what about just raw productivity at work?
in our case, I would say it's about even, but they were pretty good. But I don't. But if there was I mean, we selected for the best. I mean, I think it would be been more difficult to start with a 50-50 ratio in
Okay,
our
so
case.
you selected for the best, and you said that you had more men than women, right?
Yes.
Well, there you go. So what if you had to have 50-50? Again, this is a sort of theoretical thing, right? So I really liked working with women. I really liked managing women in a lot of ways. But the productivity difference in technical fields that I ran between men and women, it was not even comparable. The women were slow and steady win the race, for sure. But the male productivity, male capacity to lock in and blast through problems, to stay all night if they had to, that's just men would do it. Men would do it. And women not so much. Now, um, have you managed young women?
Yeah, they were all young.
Okay. And did the women get pregnant and have babies?
And no, no, it's too young for that. Maybe at
What?
least compared to
They're old
at
enough to
least
bring
in the
cake in. Okay. So what was
yeah,
the rough age of the women you were managing?
they were in their early 20s.
Okay. So what are you, Leonardo DiCaprio's coochie agent? I mean, why did you get rid of them when they got older?
No, I didn't work there for. I worked there for 3 years. It was a startup, so we scaled quite quickly, and I've left that venture. That's why I'm considering being a nomad. I mean, I could live a great life here. I could work remotely and make a decent living as well. It's just sort
Okay. So
of
hang on. So you managed women for a couple of years and none of them got pregnant.
yes,
Okay. How many women?
two.
Okay. This is
We
not a
had
very big sample size, right?
no, we had 12 men and eight. Sorry, two women.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so look, I'm not Jeff Bezos or anything like that. I've interviewed 1,000 people. I've hired about 100 people, managed a team of 35 and so on. And I just want you to look, if we were to take, let's just say sex, we'd take sex completely out of the equation. Male, female, it's totally blind. You don't see names, you don't see sex or anything like that. Then in terms of getting into university, it would be interesting to see how that would change. Now, when it comes to hiring, let's say you're hiring men and women who are early to mid 20s, how do you work around the fact that if you want to have a culture that continues, women need to have 3 babies these days. Let's just say somehow you could get that to happen in some way or another, right? So if you are a manager, do you want to hire young men or do you want to hire young women, all other things being equal?
Well, if you only care about the business, I guess you would be open to hiring all. But as a culture and as a country, I guess there's a reason to focus on the men.
Okay, I need you to think things through, man. I need you to think things through. Sorry to be annoying. I'm going to be a nag here, right? I need you to think things through. So you hire a man and a woman who's 20, they're both 25 years old, right? And you want them to
Yeah.
work. It usually takes, in any complicated field, it usually takes 4 to 6 months to bring someone up to speed. Now, if the woman from the age of 25 to 35 is going to have and raise 3 kids, and the man is not, who do you want to hire?
From a purely productivity standpoint, yeah, I understand you want to hire the men, but there's also unseen benefits to having women. There are like a lot of having a nice
You mean the
woman
cake?
eating. No, not only the cake. People like there's this thing about having the office or something, right? But
Having the
it's not
what?
only that. It's also in
Sorry,
terms
having
of
you said
invest.
having the I don't think you said orifice. I think you said office. What do you mean?
Yeah. People like having not just being a guy fist all the time at the office, although there's boons to that as well. But I think also the other part is that in this current environment, I mean, if you want funding or if you want to have a prize, get a prize or some award or some
No, no, no. I'm
recognition.
talking about just purely. I mean, business is economic. It's not social. It's not cultural. It's not a cake tasting contest. Business is about productivity. So if you were to say we are going to remove all government supports for female employment, and you get what you negotiate, women could not, in general, compete with men.
That's a fact.
It's just a fact.
Yeah.
So if you were to say to women, we're going to get rid of all hiring policies from the government. Now, of course, we're still going to keep in, you can't be ripped off, you can't be assaulted at work, right? And all of that. But so the laws would still apply. But if you were to say, you get what you negotiate, then a woman who's 25, who's competing with a man who's 25, will lose. She will not get hired because you train her for 6 months, then she becomes economically productive. She works for a year, she gets pregnant, and she's gone.
Yeah, in general, they won't be hireable on the same terms, right? Because you got to account for them being absent.
Well,
But
and let's say, and I agree. So let's say, and this is, we're just being blunt here about the economics, right? The morals, we can, I'm a big one for
no,
voluntary
no, no.
economic
It's
relationships. So,
Yeah, but
oh,
there's two economics, right? Maybe they will maybe they'll take a low salary, or maybe they are just that great, right? 10% of them will be smarter than a lot of the men in the field, like a tiny subset elite. So there will be a few exceptions, but we're talking about generalities, of course.
okay, you're a smart guy, right? We don't need to say that there are some tall Chinese people in the NBA, right? I
I've
mean,
read
we
that
don't need
so
to
many
waste time. Of course, we're talking about generalities, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and but the other thing too is that even if she's some superstar, then you get used to that level of productivity, and then it gets taken away. Let's take another example. Let's say you're hiring two people. Two people come in to get hired. One is a young single man, and one is a 30-year-old single man, and the other is a 30-year-old single woman with 2 children. Like she's a single mom, right? Who are you going to hire?
You know the answer,
Right.
and everybody.
Everyone knows the answer. And this is with great sympathy, right? I mean, with great sympathy. I'm just talking about the economic facts, right? She can't work late because she's got to go get her kids from daycare. There's going to be stress. I don't know if you've ever worked with people who are going through a divorce or custody battles or something. They're a wreck. They're tired. They're tense. Every time the phone rings, I worked with a guy once. Every time the phone rang, his face turned all different shades of purple because he was going through this horrible a custody battle, and I was just wretched, and he couldn't concentrate, and so on. He just sometimes would just like stare like out into
Yeah.
space, just in general horror. And so, yeah, you're going to and they can't stay late. And if you need them to go and travel, hey, the customer's having trouble with this, that, or the other. I need you to fly out tomorrow. They can't. They can't. Now, I will say one other thing too, just to make it not sound like, I don't know, crazy sexist or something. Let's take another scenario. So you, as a hiring manager, there's a single guy and there's a guy who's married and with children. They're both 30, right? Single guy who's married and with children. Who do you hire?
But if I have a reasonable impression of the wife, I might select the married guy, right? Because he might be more stable, more solidified, might be more ambitious. Or yeah, I don't know.
I think in general, as a hiring manager, there would be a tendency to work more towards the married guy because he's going to have better social skills, he's going to have better negotiation skills, and he has a real incentive to work hard and keep his job. The single guy might just say, I've always wanted to learn how to fly a wingsuit, so I'm gonna quit and go do that, or something like that. It's an old statement, like in the business world, if you're married, it's good for your career because then at least people know someone can stand you, like someone finds value in you, and so on, right?
Yeah,
So,
and I spoke with a guy, right? How much money do men even need to survive alone, right? We can live off nothing. And I knew a guy who he went surfing for 4 months every year in Portugal,
oh yeah,
and
yeah,
that was
that kind of stuff happens for sure. And I posted something the other day on X. Basically, the argument was, why should people who don't even have kids get retirement benefits? Now, it's a little bit trolling, but there's a little bit of seriousness in it as well. So why would people without children get retirement benefits? Because everyone knows the retirement benefits are long spent, they're long gone. The only way people get retirement benefits paid is that other people have children, sort of excluding immigration, right? But even the immigrants have to have kids for their own retirement. So the only reason that anyone gets a penny of retirement benefits is because other people
others are having children.
other people are having children. Now, if you don't have kids, you save $250,000 per kid. So if you don't have three kids, you've just saved, bang, $750,000 from your 20s right onwards, right? And you don't have to pay for university and all that kind of stuff, right? And so you have saved, if you invest that $750,000 over time, you get millions and millions and millions of dollars in your retirement because it's from early on in your life and the magic of compound interest and so on, right? So I could do the math through AI, but anyone can do that. You're going to end up with millions and millions and millions of dollars. So you've saved all that money by not having children. So why shouldn't you take that money that you've saved and pay for your own retirement rather than feasting with your hollow-toothed boomer vampiric grin on the necks of my kids or your kids or something like that? And then, of course, people said, yes, but the singletons, they pay taxes to educate other people's children. First of all, it's not education, and so do married people also pay those taxes as well, so it's a little bit different. But also, I ran the numbers. You get about 10 times more in retirement benefits than you ever paid for property taxes to educate other people's children. So it is still extremely predatory, and I'm just pointing out that people who want all of these social benefits who don't have kids are vampiric and so on. So, yeah, I just
I think
wanted
it might
to.
be.
I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
I think it might be an original argument. I never heard that before, but it's so obvious. It's so true, right? They're saving all this money with compound interests and all this. They should be able to pay their own retirement.
If
Makes
you've
a lot of
ever,
sense.
yeah, if you've been a parent, I only have one kid, but one kid in some ways can be more expensive because you have to do a lot of stuff that tends to be more social. If you have two kids, they play with each other in the basement. It costs you virtually nothing. So, you every now and then you just get this sticker shock at how much it costs to have children. And then the children that you pay a huge amount of money to raise, then the single Karen witches just, feast on your kids because they were too lazy to have their own kids. And they were too frivolous to save the money that they saved from not having kids. And anyway, all right, listen, I'm going to move on to the next caller. Really appreciate your questions and so on. So yeah, young women, if you were to say to them, you get what you negotiate. There's going to be no laws about who should hire anyone. No mandatory retirement. No mandatory pregnancy leave, maternity leave. If you can negotiate that, fantastic. They will immediately be hostile to that idea. So people are not ignorant, not at all, because they know exactly where the kids aren't supposed to dig to find the bodies. All right, Vlad, impale me with your wisdom.
Hello.
Hey.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Everything fine? No feedback? Great. So yeah, just been listening to on and off what you've been saying. So I'm assuming the main debate is about the difference between men and women and who would you hire,
It's
blah blah blah.
whatever you'd like. Yeah, we don't have to do that topic at all. Whatever you'd like.
Okay, well I guess the main thing which just completely baffled me and shocked me when I heard you say it is you mentioned, you said empathy is suicide. I was wondering if you could elaborate more on that. What
Okay.
you
In
mean
what
by
context? Hang on. In
that?
what context did you hear me say that?
Oh, God. Let me rewind my
Were
brain.
you
I
half
think it was,
listening and just grabbing something from the ether
no,
rather
no, no,
than
no.
putting it in
My mind is all
context
over
or
the place.
something like that?
No, my mind is all over the place at the moment. Let me just rewind a little bit.
All right.
You were talking about women. Let me just refresh my memory. You were talking about women. Yes, there we go. So women, when it comes to you know, position of power, um, and
Okay,
you.
listen, I don't want to be the math teacher who's asking you to put your work on the board and you're just making it up as you go along. So the context was, if you have saved up enough food just to get you through the winter, and then your neighbors come pounding on the door in February, and if you take them in, you're all going to starve to death. Empathy is suicide when resources are scarce and you've planned and other people haven't. Like if you're off the Titanic, you get to the lifeboats early because you're smart and you tell other people to get to the lifeboats, and then you get on a lifeboat and there's 10 people who want to get into the lifeboat with you, but if they come into the lifeboat, you all drown. You've got to kick them off. You've got to kick them into the water. You have to watch them die. You have to watch them drown, or you all die. So
Okay, but I'm talking
empathy,
about
when
general. I'm talking
resources
about
are
general.
limited, empathy is suicidal.
When I think of empathy, I mean general empathy. I mean empathy in a societal context. Being empathetic towards what someone's going through. I understand. Um, I understand completely what you're saying. You know, you got to focus on yourself essentially. But
No. Okay. Do you spend a lot of time on your phone because your listening skills are not razor sharp? Did I
no,
say you
well,
have to focus? Hang on. Did I say you have to focus on yourself?
well, you're saying, for example, to not feel empathy is suicidal. When I my
To
argument
hang
would
on,
be,
hang on, slow down. To not feel empathy is suicidal. I thought you said I said empathy was suicidal. Now you're saying to not feel empathy is suicidal.
well, that's what you said.
To not feel empathy is suicidal.
No. You said empathy is suicidal,
No, I
and
didn't.
that
No,
you
no,
did.
no, I didn't. No, I didn't.
My mind must be playing tricks on me because when I was hearing you talk about women and men and
Okay, so let's go back to the scenario.
sure.
Did you listen to the scenario about winter in the past in northern climates when there's no way to get food until spring, summer, and you've got just enough food to get through the winter, you and your family, right? And your wife is pregnant. She got pregnant. Whoopsie. And so you need like all of the so you have just enough food for your family to get through the winter, and your neighbors come pounding on the door
Yeah,
because they
I
don't
get
have
that.
enough food. Do you understand that that is not saying all empathy is suicidal?
Okay. Well, that makes more sense now because I thought you were talking in a general kind of context. Empathy is suicide, and that was just absurd to me. I think I understand.
Okay,
There's only
so
some
hang on. How long have you listened to what I do?
about 30 minutes we're listening to so far.
Oh, you've never listened to me before, right?
No, I have listened. Are you talking about this live session
No,
right
no,
now,
no.
or
How
in
long have you
general?
listened to what I do as a whole?
Oh, I've been following you since YouTube, back in the day. But I think the first thing I saw of first video I saw of you was the what's his name, the Virgin Killer. What's his name?
Oh, Elliot Rodger.
Elliot Rodger. Yeah, that
Okay,
was
so would you
quite.
say that I'm a fairly intelligent communicator?
Yeah, I'd
Okay.
say so.
So
I say you know your fact.
if you
You
think
know,
that I've said all empathy is suicidal, would you think that I'm being crazy or maybe you got something wrong?
I want you to elaborate. This is why I'm asking you. I want you to elaborate. Again, I haven't been following you constantly, but it's just, switched on YouTube. I saw you pop up and I was like, oh, I kind of I want you to elaborate more on that. What you mean by, but now you've demonstrated what you've said. You've
Let me
demonstrated what you've said.
let me interrupt you for a second. This may
Sure.
sound like a non sequitur. Just bear with me for a second, or indulge me if you don't mind.
All
How's your dating life?
right. Why is that relevant?
I'll tell you why it's relevant. Because you have a performative contradiction. If I said empathy is suicidal, then it would be suicidal for me to answer your question because I would have to have empathy for you wanting an answer to my question, right? And then if empathy is suicidal, asking me the question is asking me to empathize with your need to have an answer and then satisfying that, right?
I'm not looking for validation. I'm not looking for any validation here, my friend. I'm not looking for that.
Now you're on another tangent. I didn't mention validation either. Do you
Well, you're
understand
making
that
you're making it.
do you understand that if you ask me to empathize with your need to have a question and I say empathy is suicidtal, you're
I'm not
relying
asking you to
hang on, let me finish my thought. See, when I'm talking, you need to not talk. I need you to empathize with that, right? Because we can't both talk at the same time.
All right.
So you do understand that if you ask me a question, I have to show some empathy towards you to give you an answer. Because if I didn't have any empathy at all, unless I could make the answer somehow beneficial to me or make me look smart at your expense or something like that, I wouldn't be able to answer it. So the reason I'm asking is that it only takes a moment's thought if you're kind of only half listening, because you were only half listening, and I don't mean this to be, hang on. You gotta shut up when I'm talking, okay? And I'll try and shut up when you're talking, okay? Because yelling in my ear when I'm trying to explain something is not showing any empathy, and I can see why maybe you have trouble with the concept. So, I'm a pretty smart guy. I've written entire books on ethics. And you may not know all of this, right? That's fine. Written entire books on peaceful parenting. I do call-in shows, which I'm sure you've heard, where I'm very empathetic towards people and sensitive towards people. So, in that situation, I'm giving you this as a bit of life coaching, right? Because it's going to drive you nuts if you're with a quality woman and you jump to conclusions entirely against the evidence. So if you were to call me up and you were to say, Steph, I heard something really surprising. I'm sure you don't mean it. If you wouldn't mind taking just a sec to explain it, right? As opposed to calling me up and said, Steph, you said that empathy is suicide. What's up with that?
No, I asked you to elaborate. And you did elaborate.
I didn't elaborate. You weren't listening. No, you weren't listening earlier. No, I didn't elaborate. I gave the entire scenario before. You weren't listening, which is fine. It's not like you got to sit there and stare at the screen and listen. But in a situation, this is just about efficient human communication. In a situation where somebody says something that makes no sense to you at all,
right,
then don't assume that the other person is just kind of crazy and wrong. I didn't elaborate because I elaborated earlier. I elaborated earlier when I gave the entire scenario. So if you are not listening, then jumping in and saying, well, Seth, you said this crazy thing. I need you to elaborate. It's like, no, you don't. You just weren't listening. And the reason it's a shame he didn't want to talk about his dating life, because if you've ever been in a relationship with people who jump to conclusions and only half listen and then think that you're kind of crazy or wrong, you're not going to have a good relationship with someone if you jump to conclusions, right? And so on, right? Okay. We got another caller. Thank you guys so much for jumping in. Great conversation tonight. All right. What do we got? Artis or Artia, something like that. If you want to unmute. And I wasn't, and so also then when he said, well, you're just saying you need to look out for yourself. And I said, in particular, it's because of your family issues. So you got a kid. I even had the whole scenario where, oh man, my wife got pregnant. Now I've got to feed her too. I just don't have enough food for you. So when I'm saying you have to protect your family from starvation, and then the guy says, well, you're just saying that it's all about yourself. And it's like, no, that's not even close to the, anyway. People get impulsive, and rather than listen and say, well, I don't really want to waste the audience's time because I'm sure he didn't mean that, right? All right. R2, Going once, going twice. All right, looks like he is not with us and working or something like that. Work on your gut. If you want to unmute.
Can we now hear? Can we now hear?
All right, go ahead.
Yes. Okay, I was on with wrong device, but okay. Nice to talk to you now. Very new because I have been listening to you for years. Thank you. But the thing that I want to investigate or hear your opinion about is about Bible and about Jesus in specific. And um, uh, in my perspective, this God in Bible is somewhat an evil person. Okay, and I think there are multiple, let's say, cases in the Bible. For example, killing a man when he's picking up sticks, and all kind of various, maybe even immoral, could be said, immoral things happening in the Old Testament, maybe even in the New Testament. So, first thing is that I think that Old Testament God is evil in some ways. Some ways he's very wise and so yada yada yada, but there are cases when he's also evil. Okay, the laws of them, the old Jewish people, they are somehow evil as well. Okay, and then the Jesus come into the scene. He kind of sees this evilness and he hates it. And he's not able to speak it out loud very straight. He has to be very wise and tricky with his words when he's speaking out these things. And yeah, what do you think about this? What do you think about this?
Well, you just gave me half a dozen different theses. Okay, so give me an example. You said killing a guy with sticks or something like that. Give me an example, if you don't mind, of something that God does in the Old Testament, let's say, that is immoral.
Okay. I really have to go. Well, this thing about guy picking up sticks. Well, okay, I have a very specific case. And this is quite interesting case as well because there is this guy going up into the mountain, Moses, receiving the law. Okay, he goes into the mountain and prays or does something like this, and then God comes down or and says that he's very angry because the people down there are worshiping some other god. They have built up this statue, and the
Yeah, the
god
golden
is
calf,
like,
yeah.
yeah, and the god is like, I'm very angry. I'm gonna kill all of them. And then the Moses says to God, please take away your evil thoughts from your mouth, from your mind. Don't kill them all. Okay, it's something like that. I'm really just paraphrasing here, but but the thing is that even in the Bible, the God is presented to have a free will, that even God can do evil things, because the Moses himself says to God, okay, please take away these evil thoughts from your mind. Please spare them. But I think even
Okay, so sorry to
after that,
interrupt because
yeah.
you got to be a little bit better prepared for these kind of questions, if you don't mind. So this is from Exodus 32. This event takes place shortly after God dramatically delivered the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea, received miraculous food, lembus or manna in the wilderness, and arrived at Mount Sinai. There, God gave Moses the 10 Commandments and the law. While Moses was on the mountain for 40 days receiving God's instructions, the people below grew restless and impatient, much like my audience. They gathered around Aaron, Moses' brother and the high priest, and demanded, come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. And so Aaron gave in to pressure. He collected gold earrings from the people, melted them down, and fashioned a golden calf, not a Brazilian soccer leg, but an idol shaped like a young bull. The next day, the people celebrated with sacrifices, feasting and wild partying, declaring, "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." God saw what was happening and told Moses on the mountain, "Go down, because your people have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them." God was so angry he considered destroying the entire nation and starting over with Moses. But Moses pleaded with God and reminded him of his promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God relented from total destruction. So Moses came down the mountain carrying the 2 stone tablets. When he saw the golden calf and the people dancing and singing, he became furious. He threw down the tablets and smashed them at the foot of the mountain, symbolizing how the people had broken God's covenant. He then burned the golden calf in the fire, ground it into powder, scattered the powder into water, and made the people drink it. Moses confronted Aaron, who tried to blame the people. "Oh, you know how they are," and gave a weak excuse. "I threw the gold into the fire, and it just came out looking like a calf." Moses called for those who were on the Lord's side. The Levites responded and carried out judgment. About 3,000 people were killed that day. Now, is that what you mean?
Yeah, but yeah, exactly that. Was
Okay,
that
hang
straight Bible?
on.
Uh,
Who killed the people?
there was some kind of war, I suppose. So Moses and his guys, probably.
Okay, so how is that God?
No, that is not God. Was that straight out of Bible? Because I think in the mountain there was very specifically said like this, that there was God and Moses was talking. And
Okay, but
the
God,
God,
hang on.
God intention.
Hang on. You need to give me something where God was evil. Now, God, I don't believe, commanded to kill.
Yeah, but there was in the earlier, as you said, there was this that God was willing to like take out the whole nation.
Yes, but he didn't.
But Moses pleaded, "Please don't do that." Yes. Right. So I think that was quite evil to take out the whole nation, because if God could have had His will as well, right? So if it was God's will initially, okay, let's kill them all.
Okay, but why
right?
don't we just do the drowning of the whole world with Noah's flood? I mean, that's a whole lot easier than this whole thing with the golden calf, right?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Let's do that, for example.
Okay, so God
then
killed God. Just so people know, so God saw that the world was very, very briefly. God saw the world was full of sinners, and He goes to Noah and says, "Build an ark with cubits and get 2 of every species," and blah 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 blah. And so he drowned the whole world except for Noah and his family and all the kids and blah 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 blah. All the kids were killed, and
Yes.
babies in the crib and fetuses in the womb were all killed and murdered. Everyone on the planet except for Noah and his family, something like that. And that's a whole lot easier, I think, to process than the golden calf story.
Yeah, that is a good example, and it would be really nice to actually have these examples now played out. But yes, that is an example. Okay, God is killing now everybody, and to God after that, of course, says he's regretting that. He actually in the Bible says, "Okay, I regret this. This was not so good thing for me to do." So God in the Bible sees himself that, okay, this was not maybe okay. Okay. So God is capable of doing evil as well. That's one thing, right? That is, God has free will in the Bible as well to choose maybe evil sometimes.
Well, hang on. So let's jump back from using the term evil to make sure that we know what it means. So what do you mean by the word evil?
Yeah. Evil is even more. That is the only thing that I can define. Okay. Evil is I can shortly define evil as going against the property rights. Okay.
Going against
when-
property rights.
Yeah, that is evil in short definition.
Okay, why?
Well, if you take something from me, you are stealing. so that is against my property rights.
No, I understand. I
That is
understand it's
evil.
stealing. Why is that wrong?
That is wrong because, well, even the word steal means that I should have able to own something, right?
Why is
Uh,
stealing wrong?
Stealing is wrong. Stealing is wrong. Yes.
No, why?
And
Why is stealing wrong? See, the Christians have an answer. Thou shalt not steal is the commandment from God. You're obviously not religious, which is fine. Why is stealing wrong?
yeah, well, it is my belief that property rights are something rights that we are born with.
No, that you can't just throw a ghost in people and say you've explained something. Like, you understand that from an evolutionary standpoint, stealing is very efficient, right? I mean, if some guy is going to spend his whole year growing a bunch of crops, and I just go and take a bunch of his crops, it's much more efficient, much more energy efficient for me to steal his crops than for me to grow my own.
Yeah,
So from an evolutionary standpoint, stealing, and it happens in nature all the time, like even hermit crabs will steal each other's shells and so on, right? And so, I mean, the cuckoo lays its egg in the nest of another bird and, in a sense, steal resources that were supposed to be for their own kids. So stealing, for want of a better word, happens in nature all the time. Stealing is incredibly efficient, and stealing serves genetics, right? Because if you don't store up enough, to go back to our earlier example, if you don't store up enough for the winter, and then you go and steal from your neighbor, then you live, and maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but you live. So if you don't steal, then what happens is you die. And so stealing is selected for through the process of evolution. So it's good for your genes. There's no moral law coming from God. Why is it wrong?
Yeah, sure. But then that is a moral perspective, of course. When we don't have morals, you can steal and everything. But okay,
No,
why
you're
is that
begging the
wrong?
question. Hang on. You're begging the question.
Yes.
Why
Okay.
is it? Hang on. You got to slow down a little. We're trying to deal with
Okay.
complicated issues here. You're getting very, very. So just help me understand. If you're going to say God is evil, then you have a moral standard that is greater than God, which is fine. You have a moral standard called evil.
Yes.
Why is stealing evil?
Okay. If you steal from I'm going out of a limb for a while, but if you would steal from me, you would want to possess something from me, right? You have the will to possess something, and you would think that you have the right to possess and own and to hold something.
No, not the right. No, not the right, just the ability. So if you have a loaf of bread and I'm bigger than you and I'm hungry, I'll just knock you down and take the loaf of bread. I'm not saying I have the right to do it. I just have the ability to do it.
Yeah, you are correct.
Okay, so why is that evil?
You would have a desire to own something and
Sure.
to hold and possess. Okay, then I have this desire as well to possess and own something, that I can keep and you have, you just maybe have a greater ability to possess and
Sure.
own and hold. But we both have the same desire. And but ability aside, we can still hold this same ability, no, not ability, desire to possess things. We can both simultaneously at the same time have this desire to possess things. And that is not something I am not taking from you to having this desire of possessing things. And if I have things, I'm not taking from you in a way, You can still have your desire to possess things. I can have my desire to possess things. I do not have to like go against your desires for me to have my desires.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't understand what you're talking about. Why is, I don't think you know, and that's fine, but why is stealing evil?
Yeah,
Why is murder evil?
I'm
Why
trying
are
to
any of these things
investigate
evil?
this. I'm trying to why is that is a very like I could go like in your rational way, but it's hard. It's very abstract to me, like the way you have explained it. But I have come up with this. So the word stealing cannot exist if we would not have property rights.
Okay, but we don't have property rights like we have a kidney, we have skin, we have eyeballs. We don't have property rights. They don't exist like a ghost within us, right?
Yeah, it's well, they kind of do. It's like desire to have property rights.
No, but
It's kind of like
desire is why we don't have property rights, because other people steal stuff that they want from us.
no desire to have property rights in a way because
Yes,
maybe I'm a
but
weak.
this, come on, stealing only exists because people desire to violate property rights. You can't use desire as a standard of morality, because stealing, rape, theft, assault, and murder only happen because people want to do those things.
Yeah.
They have desire for those things. So you can't say desire is the basis of morality and also the basis of immorality.
Okay, then yeah, I am kind of trying to have the most simple and common way definition. Like, how can I? Because I am just going like, property rights that we can define, we can outline all the laws, all the what can we practically do? Okay, because of property rights. But why property rights is now commonly why would we define let's say theft or a murder as an evil?
Right.
Why
That's you're asking the question that I'm asking, and I can clearly see that you're
I'm
not able
trying
to answer it, which is fine.
Yes,
it's a
I
tough
am
question.
not able to answer this like with very like very simple way. Do you have like a 3-sentence explanation yourself? Could you be able to explain UBB in 3 sentences?
Well, have you read the book?
No, I have not read the book.
Have you examined or even asked AI? Because AI has absorbed the book. So do you know what UPB
Yes,
stands
I
for?
have. I have multiple times. But I do not understand the core of it. Like, is there a way actually to explain it in 3 sentences? And now I only have like definitions. Okay, let's say that we have property rights, and my argument is from property rights we can derive all of the, let's say, laws for the nation. Or
I'm sorry, did you
whatever.
ask me to define why stealing is wrong?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yes,
then you've got to
exactly.
stop. So then you've got to stop talking. If you're going to ask
Yeah.
me something, then you've got to stop talking. It seems to be a challenge for people tonight. That's all right.
Yes, please.
So, ethics is universally preferable behavior. That which cannot be universalized cannot be ethical. And so the question is, can theft be universalized? In other words, can it be universally preferable behavior to steal? No, because if it is universally preferable behavior to steal, and stealing requires you stealing from someone, then everyone must prefer to steal and be stolen from at the same time. But it's logically impossible. You cannot want to be stolen from, because if you want someone to take your property, it's not theft. So theft can never be universally preferable behavior because it can never be universalized. And the moment you try and universalize theft or rape or assault or murder, they become immediately self-contradictory and cease to exist as categories. So that is why rape, theft, assault, and murder are immoral, because they are impossible to achieve in a universal way, and ethics is universally preferable behavior. Now, people can say, oh, there's no such thing as universally preferable behavior, but they're then saying that it's universally preferable behavior to deny the existence of universally preferable behavior. You should tell the truth that there's no such thing as universally preferable behavior, but telling the truth is universally preferable behavior, so they've just self-detonated their argument. And then they could say, well, why do we have property rights? Well, because we own ourselves and we own the effects of our actions, right? So if I build a log cabin in a place that's unowned, I have created the log cabin. The log cabin is an effect of my actions. And people say, well, you don't own the effects of your actions. And then I would say, well, are you saying to me that my argument is wrong? Yes. Well, who created the argument? That's right. I created the argument. I own my argument. So anybody who responds to your argument is fully accepting that we own ourselves and we own the effects of our actions. So that is the very tidy and short way to deal with the problem of evil.
Yeah. So in short, we cannot both be stealing from. Well, we cannot.
No,
Let's
I'm
say
not.
we
Listen,
cannot
I'm
all
gonna.
be
You
stealing from.
can't do this on the fly, right? So, and I got to tell you, if you've ever seen the movie Amadeus, where the king is playing one of Salieri's tunes, and Salieri finds it quite painful, I can't listen to people who've just heard UPB try to put it back to me. Like I just can't. It's too painful to me because it's such a beautiful theory, and I can't do it. So I'm going to have to.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. If you
night.
could, I don't know why I'm not able to, but if you could mute, I'm going to go to text questions because we have some lovely text questions from people. Yes, tip.freedomain.com if you could help out the show. No ads. You've got your lovely merch at shop.freedomain.com. And also, if you would like to book call-ins, it's funny, after 21 years, I'm having a bit of gap in call-in requests. So if you've been waiting, now's the time to do your call-in request. First time in 21 years, I have a bit of a gap. It's pretty wild. I'm very pleased to have a bit of a gap, but I'd also want to keep the call-ins coming. So call.freedomain.com. Totally free. All right, so let's get to people's comments, and thank you all so much. Don't forget to like and share and subscribe. The question. All right. Ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. All right. Recently, says Hamish, I was listening to podcast 4354 from May 2nd, 2019, and you spoke of the book you wrote but never published, which you called Crazy Talk, based off your therapy journal notes. You said in the podcast you would likely never publish it. Has your thought on that changed at all over the last 7 years? Also, is there anything with the book that has helped you with world events since, or you now think potentially has any value to others? So it wasn't a book that I wrote based on my therapy journals. It was just all my therapy journals. I wanted to make sure I didn't lose them or, toss them out by accident. And so I typed them all up and kept them in a secure place. And what happened over the course, for those of you who don't know, I did like 2.5 years of therapy. I did it 3 hours a week, Thursdays and Tuesdays afternoon from 3:30 to 5. I managed to get some stuff, time off from work. And I also did, 8-10 hours of therapy journaling and wild conversations with myself. I had a whole cast of characters. I still remember all of their names. I had a whole cast of characters that would viciously argue with me, call me terrible names, and yank and pull and chide me to wisdom. And there were some more gentle characters and so on. And so in these absolutely ferocious arguments with myself about my lack of integrity, my acceptance of lower standards in relationships than I had in philosophy, I got the idea that I was not an individual. I was not an I was a we. And this is where I developed the idea of what was called, or what I call the mecosystem, right? Which is me is a whole system of balancing forces. You know, like the earth is an ecosystem. Me, I am a mecosystem. So I have a whole bunch of identities in here that are critics and supporters, and everyone has to get a seat at the table. When I have to make a big decision, I consult obviously with the people in my life that I love. I consult with my inner voices and so on, and everyone gets a seat at the table, no matter how appalling or aggressive or horrifying or negative or what I might call, quote, evil, they get a seat at the table. And I have found that the great peace of mind and security and confidence that I have in the world comes from the fact that there is no part of myself that is unwelcome to myself. I really want to make sure I make this clear. This is the central thing that I got out of like $20,000 invested in therapy, which is one of the best investments I ever made in my life. Thank God I went through all of that before I met my wife, who practiced psychology for decades. So there is no part of myself that attacks myself. I can have my critics. I can have, oh, you shouldn't have done this, or you should have done that. But I don't have self-abuse. Self-abuse arises when you don't listen to legitimate criticisms of yourself. You know, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution an inevitability. And so this is one of the reasons why I'm able to take such savage and scathing criticism from society. See, here's what critics are trying to do to you. They're trying to get to that part of you that thinks you're a piece of crap. You know, if you had those negative voices, parents or maybe elder siblings or younger siblings or priests or teachers, you know, all the people who just thought maybe you were worthless or crap or nothing or unimportant or ridiculous or foolish or clumsy. All of the people who give you all of they put all these negative bombs in your brain, right? Like mines in your brain. So when people attack you, what they're trying to do is they're trying to hook into the parts of you that agree with them. Steph, you're a vainglorious da-da-da-da-da, right? You're a racist, whatever. Like, they're trying to hook into those parts of you that agree with them. Oh, maybe I am a terrible guy. Maybe I am a cult leader. Maybe I am blah, 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 right? So they're trying, like, this happened a couple of live streams ago. Somebody was like, oh, you're e-begging, right? freedomain.com/donate to help out the show. You're begging people. And it's like, no, I'm just asking for what I want and what I genuinely believe that I deserve. I believe that I provide absolutely enormous and immense value in the world. One of a kind, immense, massive value in the world, because I'm the guy who took philosophy out of the ivory tower, out of the cloud castles, brought it down to put it to work in people's actual freaking lives to their immense benefits. And I get these emails coming in. I've listened to you. I got married. I have kids. Built a great community and so on. I just visited one not too long ago in New Hampshire, full of some lovely people doing great things with their community and marriages that came out of the show and babies that are coming out of the show. So a lot of great stuff. So when I ask for support, donations and so on, it's because I know that I provide massive value, and it's reasonable and fair to ask for what you want. It's not begging to say, please donate at the show. Begging would be if I don't provide any value. Like a beggar on the street is just, I don't provide any value, just give me $10. But if I'm providing value and ask for reciprocity, that's not begging. So when people say, oh, Steph, you're just e-begging, like just to take one of a bazillion examples of stuff that people have said to me over the decades I've been doing philosophy, they're trying to hook into that part of me that hates myself. But the only reason a part of me would hate myself is if I'm not listening to its wisdom. Everyone gets a seat at the table. Every part of me, even the part of me that was defensive against my mother's invasive madness, gets a seat at the table. And the inner mom protects me from crazy people in the world, because my inner mom was forged as a protection from a crazy person. My mother, a crazy, violent, aggressive person. So my inner mom she's my ninja. She's my Kill Bill yellow banana suit ninja that protects me from crazy people, because she can spot crazy people because she's cast by the shadow of crazy person. So she knows what crazy people look like. So the reason why I've been able to sustain in a way that not many people have, like we think of someone like Jordan Peterson or something like that, I've been able to sustain a public presence in the face of, some truly psychotic and mind-bending hatred and contempt and aggression and lies and so on, right? Because when people attack you, they're trying to hook into that part of you that is willing to attack yourself. But there's no part of me that wants to attack me, because I'll listen to every part of me. If you tap on, you tap on someone's window, you're trying to get their attention, right? You're desperate to get their attention. Then they don't look up. You're just going to rap louder, and eventually you might rap so hard you break the window, and right. So escalation comes from not being listened to. Most times when you listen to people, it's a de-escalation scenario. I mean, I've been confronted by, psychos in the street based on what I do. I just listen to them, right? Just listen, and every single time it has de-escalated. I'm not saying that's going to happen 100% of the time, but so far, so good. So the big thing I got out of therapy was every part of me has a seat at the table, right? Every part of me has a seat at the table. I had a guy, professor of philosophy, a couple of months ago. He was actually back, I think, a couple of shows ago, call me in and say, I didn't understand basic logic. And so he's basically saying, you're an incompetent idiot, right? So his opinion doesn't mean anything to me. The only thing that would matter is if he says, oh, Steph, you're an incompetent idiot. The only thing that would matter is if he was able to somehow connect to that part of me that agreed with him. Now, of course, there's a part of me that says I'm an incompetent idiot. There's a part of everyone who's sane. It's a great line, I think, from Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. It's like, did you ever think that Jesus might have been an evil guy? And the guy says, well, the first person that occurred to was actually Jesus himself, right? So, of course, I've thought, am I a delusional, ridiculous, incompetent fool who's got malevolent impulses and is lying to himself and doesn't have the wisdom that he claims to have and doesn't have the answer to ethics that he claims to have? And of course I've asked myself all of those questions, and I've resolved them not according to emotional bullying. Like, any part of me can say anything to me, and I have the right. If they're going to criticize and cross-examine me, totally fine. I have the right to criticize and cross-examine them, right? So, of course, it's occurred to me that I'm deluded. Of course, it's occurred to me that I could be a bad guy. Of course, it's occurred to me that I might be a megalomaniac. Of course, it's occurred to me that all of the things, that people say, right? I'm sure I didn't show up 3 times on the cover of the New York Times for being inconsequential, right? He's a bad guy. He's a cult leader. It's like, okay, maybe I am a cult leader. Let's look, what is a cult? How do I fit that definition, right? So when this guy says, God is an evildoer, it's like, okay, well, we know what God is. What is evil? If you're going to say God is this, you should know what this is, right? If I say a rodent, a rat is a mammal, it's like, okay, well, what's a mammal? Well, warm-blooded, and it gives birth to live young and has hair, whatever it is, right? So you got to have the definition. So I'm happy to be critiqued by any part of myself. And when I hadn't listened to the parts of myself that had criticisms of myself, the parts that come from the future, the parts that come from the conscience, the parts that come from your higher self, your better being, whatever you want to call it, your potential. Because I had spent decades rejecting self-criticism because it felt like abuse, right? Because when you grow up with a lot of abuse and aggression and name-calling and put-downs, then self-criticism gets dangerously close to feeling abusive, self-abusive. But then you end up without legitimate self-criticism, and you end up like a hot air balloon with virtually no ability to steer yourself because you can't be critical of yourself. So people are absolutely welcome to criticize me. I have done it myself 10,000 times before someone else does, right? So basically, somebody's saying to me, Steph, I want you to punch yourself. You punch yourself. Steph, punch yourself. I mean, have I ever had the urge to punch myself? Of course. I mean, when I was a kid and I was trying to learn tennis, it's a very frustrating game, I smashed a whole racket. I threw the racket right there. I'm a hot-tempered young fellow, half Irish, half German, so it's a very calculated rage. But the value of everyone gets a seat at the table, and if a part of you has strong criticisms of yourself, listen. But don't just listen and roll over, because that's giving them too much authority. Everything is a negotiation. Everyone gets a seat at the table, and the parts of me that exist all come to decisions collectively, right? So there was a time in 2019, 2020, when I was real skating close to the Charlie Kirk edge of danger in politics. And part of me was like, I don't know, man. Another part of me, no, you got to keep going, got to be courageous. Like, well, you know that excessive courage is foolhardiness. I have that whole debate with myself. And I don't make a decision to move forward in any major way until all the parts of me have come to some reasoned agreement. And then, in general, I never have to look back. Because when you've made a really good decision, when you consult with the people you love, and you consult with the parts of yourself that strongly disagree and the parts of yourself that agree, and you all come to a consensus, then you make that decision and you move you move forward. I mean, if everyone in your family says, yeah, we're going to go here for vacation, and you have a negotiation, you all end up agreeing, you don't get there and then say, oh, we're going to go somewhere else, because you've already had that discussion and that agreement. So I hope that makes some kind of sense. All right. Thank you so much. More Sun. You can subscribe. Tip.freedomain.com. How do I live a meaningful life without religion? After breaking away from religion because of my doubts, I'm struggling to find a meaning and a purpose. Promote virtue, fight evil. Promote virtue, fight evil. If you do that, your life is exciting enough that you won't worry about purpose. Purposelessness and meaninglessness arise when you are understimulated. I mean, think of your best orgasm. Do it right now. Think of your best orgasm. Did you ever worry about meaning while having your best orgasm? No, because you're having a great time, right? Think of you got some fantastic piece of news and you're over the moon, you're thrilled, you're happy, you're excited. Do you sit there and say, well, what's the meaning of things, right? Meaning comes out of, questions about meaning come out of boredom and understimulation. And if you ever want to be the most productively and healthily stimulated, promote virtue and fight evil, and you will never, ever worry about meaning and purpose, because your life will be very exciting. I guarantee that. I would like to do a chat about my crazy mother-in-law, says someone. I'm a member on X. Wasn't sure if you saw my message. I have not seen that, but call.freedomain.com. Call.freedomain.com. You donated. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I was wondering, what is your opinion? What is your opinion on a 17-year-old teenager having a sleepover at the girlfriend's parents' place? The other parents are cool about it and have confirmed that they will have them sleep in separate rooms. I have not met the parents yet in person. After listening to you for some time now, I can see the benefit of taking it slow. We're spending the night under the same roof with a new girlfriend, but I struggled getting this across to my son. Why would they have a sleepover? Why would there be a need for a sleepover? Why would there be a need for a sleepover? You can get a hotel room for like $80, like a motel room, some Super 8 thing, $100 or whatever it is, right? So I don't know why there would be any need for a sleepover. That is just putting, that's like a drunk going to a bar. I'm not going to drink. It's like, but why put yourself in that situation of temptation? All right. Ba-dum-bum. Do you believe in the nuclear family? I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, I understand what you mean by nuclear family. I'm not sure what you mean, do I believe in the nuclear family? In a state of statelessness, right? In a truly free, voluntary society, you need your community. You need your family. You need your friends. Now, people can atomize and do whatever they want because they can always run to the government, right? Hello, Steph. Had a question on time management and parenting. Recently had my second daughter. Congratulations. And I'm curious if you had any time management techniques for your parenting personal work ratio. Yeah, if you have a stay-at-home wife, if you have a stay-at-home mom for your kids, that's your basic time management. It's how you negotiate with your wife about how you spend your time. All right. How am I just finding Steph on YouTube? You are finding me. It's great stuff. Thank you. Thank you. Somebody says, they would say, well, I've looked at and compared the effects of the welfare state versus private charity and have determined that the welfare state is more effective at engendering social good. Right. Well, then I would say it's more effective for marriage if the government forces people to get married. Right? More people are going to end up getting married if the government forces people to get married. Is it right to force people to do something that you consider the good? No, of course not, right? Therefore, the welfare state is a violation of the non-aggression principle because it requires violence and counterfeiting and intergenerational debt, which is immoral, to achieve. But Steph, sometimes you need that cake. Hey, man, if you knew how comfortable I was sitting, you'd absolutely understand I have more than enough cake already. Dun, dun, dun. All right. All right. Bum, 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 bum. There goes my old girlfriend. There's another diamond ring. All right. Don't forget to check out my Sam Hyde, HYDE appearance. You know, it's funny, you still can't search for me on YouTube. My name is like Voldemort. It does not show up. It does not show up. All right. Let me just get to any last questions. Sorry, I gotta have a phone here because Ute, no, not Ute. X only allows you to run a show from your phone. It's completely bizarre. Why can it not do it? Not even on a tablet. Only a phone. So I got to have a phone here, and it's in the way of reading my stuff. All right. God's dealing with imperfect people, not the other way around. Death is not the end. God's saving everyone, and they turn around and betray him. They deserve to die, as we all do. Yeah, I mean, you could make that case. So God is has created an experiment, and the experiment is going badly because everyone has evil thoughts forever, and therefore you're just going to have to format things and start again. You know, if you ever have that computer where you end up things going more and more wrong, and eventually you just format it and start again. Or if you've ever tried a computer project, you just format it and start again if it's going really badly. So he just formats things and start again. Right. All right. Let me see here. What else can I get? I mean, there are lots of brave political females, of course, right? But certainly single females are wedded to the state, which is why the government is so obsessed with turning women against men, right? This feminism is just turning women against men, and you got to serve somebody. So if you don't serve your husband, you serve your boss. And if you don't serve your husband or your boss, you serve the state through being dependent on welfare. Why do you waste your time with this? Your presentation style vids from years ago are more fun. I'm actually going to do one tomorrow. I think I'm going to do one tomorrow. The truth about marijuana. Marijuana. All right. Aren't all crimes a form of theft? You could say that way. Dude spent like 10 minutes talking about nothing but one step to explain it in 3 sentences. So, you know, here's an interesting thing. It's a very true fact in life, my friends, that you're not hiding anything from anyone. So we could all hear that guy with the accent who wanted to talk about God and evil. We could all understand very clearly like that he could not answer the question. Why is stealing wrong? Well, because property rights. Well, that's begging the question, right? And property rights don't exist. And they don't. Human rights don't exist. Humans have properties. We don't have rights. So we all could hear him very clearly not answering the question. And everyone thinks they're very cunning, and everyone thinks, well, I'll just keep talking, and everyone think I'm smart, and everyone think that I could answer. And we all know. You know, honestly, it's like the kid with chocolate all over his face saying, I didn't eat any chocolate, right? I mean, it's just, right. Are you still in the Greater Toronto area? It's changed a lot since I last watched you when Trayvon Martin was killed. It certainly has. But you'll forgive me if I don't tell you where I am. I'm in the grey ping-pong bubble of truth. Bubble? I think that's bubble, not bubble. Yeah, so if somebody's going to say God is evil, then they have to say that there's a standard of evil that God is not conforming to, which is obviously bigger than God's will. So you got to have a really good argument for that, right? Ba-bum. All right. Women don't do what's best for babies. What about letting in strangers is best for babies? Oh, yeah. Oh, so you're talking about really creepy stuff with single moms who sometimes by proxy proffer up their own children to really creepy guys in return for financial security. This is a very primitive way of operating. But, I mean, the whole family formation is in a drip, dissolve state from state power. It's the government versus the family. Ecosystem sounds like a great idea. So go to FD Podcasts, FD for free domain, fdpodcast.com, and do a search for Ecosystem, MECOSYSTEM. And there's lots of shows about it. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. How many views would the truth about why I was wrong about Donald Trump video get? 100K maybe. Yeah, it was kind of nice to see the Sam Hyde shows cooking well north of 300K. He's kind of nice. Somebody says, I love this talk about the ecosystem. Doing internal family systems therapy or parts work has been such a game changer. I can totally relate to this, Steph. I have a good relationship with my parts. Yes. People who attack you, you attack yourself because it's safer to punch yourself than it is to have someone punch you. It's safer to punch yourself. Right? I had this with the fellow on Sam Hyde. I tried to give him the theoretical of, would you rather punch yourself or have someone else punch you? And he actually failed the, what did you have for, how would you eat? How would you feel if you didn't eat breakfast question? But yeah, so it feels like there's a part of you that's attacking you, but it's actually keeping you safe. The part that's punching you punches you so that other people don't punch you. So Genghis Khan wasn't exactly a good neighbor. That's true. Genghis Khan killed about 10% of the entire world's population. And Mongolians have statues to him and have him on their currency. It's wild. Does anyone think the Spanish conquering or stealing from the savages was a bad thing? Oh, no. The Mayans and the Aztecs in particular, were absolute evildoers, like murdering 10,000, 20,000 children a year after drugging them and torturing them because they believed one of their crazy gods fed on the tears of children. And one of the reasons why the conquistadors were able to conquer them is because all the local tribes hated them so much that they geared up with. So, no, nothing of value was lost, and the world was made a better and brighter place because of that, right? All right, let's see here. Any other questions? Karaoke time. That's right. That's right. I actually had a family friend. This young woman is a very good pianist and guitarist, and she obliged to let me sing with her a little bit recently, and she's got, much better voice than I do and all of that. But it was nice to sing together a little bit here, and we'll put that out for donors at some point, probably over the next week. All right. Anything else? But I think not. I live 50 minutes from you, bro. Vertically, I hope. Oh, there you are. Oh, yeah, you might want to wear some undies. The commando style is a ballsack in the sky, which is also a French rider flying. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for a beautiful evening. We will talk soon. Lots of love. freedomain.com/donate. We'll see you Friday night, 7 p.m. And don't forget, donor show is going to be Sunday morning, 10 a.m. So freedomain.locals.com or freedomain.com/donate to help out the show. I probably saved you like 10, 15 minutes by not having ad reads or anything like that. And that really does add up over the course of a long series of shows. So thank you, everyone, so much. Have a beautiful evening. Lots of love. Great questions. I appreciate all the call-ins. We'll talk soon. Bye.